thinking. See if you can make peace with these movements of sense experience. Doing our best to let go of any need to govern, any need to control. Instead, we're learning to let nature be nature. So the nature, the thinking mind, has permission to be the way it is. And the nature of the hearing has permission to be sensitive to sounds. Nature of the sensitive body to sensation, it has complete permission to feel what it feels. And so we're sitting with this open awareness, and in any one moment there will be a particular experience being known, and wisdom will recognize that experience as a hearing being known, or a touching being known, or a thinking being known. Something from one of the 6 sense gates, the 5 physical senses, and the mental activity as the 6th. Something is being known. And then in particular tonight, as we're aware of these different activities of hearing, sensing the sensations, sensing sights, noticing thought and emotion. In addition tonight, see if you can notice how ungovernable that the experience, whatever it might be, is unfolding according to its own causes and conditions. And when the mind projects some need to control, some need to own and govern and manage, then we feel that tension that comes with that projection. And when the wisdom in the mind leaves everything alone, allowing nature to be nature, then the moment becomes lighter, freer of that stress of feeling the need to control, or feeling the need to govern, or to own in some way. So to get familiar, you might want to move through the 6 sense gates several times in a relaxed way, just so that the wisdom in the mind becomes clear about this activity of hearing, and how it's moving, and how it's ungovernable, nobody's in charge. And then move to that movement of sensitivity to bodily sensations. And after a minute or so, move on to seeing, and the sensitivity to seeing, even with the eyes closed, seeing is happening. Smelling and tasting won't be that predominant, but you can check in with each of those sense gates. And then, of course, mental activity, this inclusive category of all mental, emotional activity. And if you need support, you can just, as you're working with a particular sense gate, from time to time, just acknowledge hearing is being known, sensations are being felt, thinking is being known, something like that. And as you patiently go through each of the 6 sense gates, noticing this activity as a movement, then you'll naturally notice if at times there's something extra, some attachment, some identification or sense of ownership, wanting to govern or control. And we'll notice appropriately the tension, the stress that goes with the selfing around that particular experience. How it appears heavy in the heart, tight in the heart. So just acknowledge that. And you can even notice the attachment as a kind of mental activity being known. It's also not personal. It's something that comes and goes according to its own causes and conditions, the force of habit. So in this way, even when the mind is distracted, then as soon as you remember, just deconstruct that moment in terms of one of these 6 sense gates being known. See if you can sense it as an impersonal or a movement of nature, not self. So we'll continue in silence for a while. So with this kind of practice, any experience will do. You're not trying to have a particular experience. So that whatever the experience is, just try to understand which of the 6 sense gates this experience is arising. Is it a sound being known, a thought being known, sensation being known, sight being known, smell or taste being known? And notice how that experience is part of a flow, an unfolding dynamic. And notice its ungovernable nature, that it's unfolding according to a complex array of causes and conditions. Some may be understood, some not. And if the mind, out of habit, resists, has an opinion like, I don't like this, I want this, then that too is just something arising in one of the 6 sense gates, something being known, something that's also an impersonal unfolding, driven by causes and conditions. So see if you can work with this contemplation in a relaxed way. And see if you can catch that even the most subtle habit of owning or selfing around some experience comes with tension. So in a way we're learning, as a meditation practice, we're learning to deeply trust and ground into the reality of sensitivity. There is this very obvious truth of sensitivity right now. We say the mind or the heart is sensitive to these 6 sense gates, naturally, unavoidably sensitive. So we're learning to rest in that sensitivity and learn not to presume it's more than what it is. This sensitivity, these 6 sensitivities are being known. So that means the meditation is learning to keep things this simple, not to project or out of habit imagine there's more than these 6 activities being known. And no matter how personal an experience might appear to be, it's still just one of these 6 sense gates being known. So we're getting competent at this deconstruction. Any moment, any experience, deconstructing into these 6 things being felt, being known. Even a subtle sense of wanting to do it right is just something being known. And you even get to the place where you might learn to appreciate, even enjoy, in a sense, catching that the mind has once again established a sense of self, sense of ownership, and then just deconstruct that. This is being known, this is being known, this is also being known. Just these 6 sense gates being known, being felt. So that any moment of the mind being entangled or reactive, there grows this confidence that it isn't what it appears to be. It appears that it's me with a problem, or me with an opinion, an agenda. But wisdom understands it's just these 6 things being known. Nothing really personal there, just these natural activities of body and mind being known, being felt. None of which refers back to anything permanent or essential. All we can really say is that this is being known, this is being felt. That's it. Take some time, adjust your body so you're comfortable. Releasing tension if you have any. Thanks, Karen, and thanks for jumping in for Carolyn tonight. It's nice the folks that volunteer to make the Buddhist Studies class happen. Doug helps with the recording and the PA system, and Scott does the live streaming, and several of you volunteer to be program hosts. So just let us know if you want to get involved and help out in those kinds of ways. Tonight we'll have small groups in about a half an hour. And in particular tonight, I thought it might be nice for us to kind of go right to the thick of it. How the mental activity, constantly spinning, our likes and dislikes, our hopes, our fears, our opinions, our impressions, all of this endless meaning making, which is nature, so it's not bad, but it definitely can cast a real spell in the sense of appearing to be somebody, me or you, right? So I thought it might be nice in the small groups to, in particular, to look at mental activity and just our own experience of acknowledging, in that small group context, how moments of mental activity, how compelling or convincing it is that that's me talking to me. Right? It doesn't seem impersonal at all. It feels as personal, as anything can be. And then you might have examples of noticing mental activity in a less personal way. Right? So what supports that kind of loosening up of how wisdom in the mind understands mental activity? What seems to support a fresher, a newer look, where it's seen more as a movement of nature, as opposed to my thought, my understanding? And the nice thing, it really shifts so much in how we practice as that insight around what mental activity is. Because until we start to develop that insight, that mental activity, it's just what it is, and it's not more than what it is, right? It's thought being known, or mental activity being known, but it's not more than that. With that insight, then it really shifts how we practice. Because before that insight begins to develop, we can't help, regardless of what the teacher says or what we're studying, it really feels like I got to get in control of this mind, because it's wild, it's problematic, and it just feels like I need to work with it in this very direct, muscular kind of way, parental way. But we would only do that if it felt like it was personal. So I have to personally deal with myself because I'm off, I'm misbehaving, I shouldn't be thinking this way. Why is that thought coming up? This is not what I should be thinking about. Please pay attention to this. Why are you disobeying me? Right? So there's a lot of practice, right? That characterizes a lot of our practice, doesn't it? And even when when we rightly sense how frustrating, how much that doesn't work, we don't have a better way. We think somehow I'm not trying hard enough, or they haven't given me the right instructions yet, like about how to control the mind. And so it can be really frustrating. But it begins to shift where we realize it's not about controlling the mind or controlling mental activity. It's really about not forgetting what mental activity is. So that's more the effort, to notice the mental activity and to not forget what it is. Oh, it's just that mental activity being known, just that emotion being felt, just this thing we call the body being felt, sounds being heard. And even if that way of practicing triggers a real this seems so stupid, how could this be helpful, right? We would just do the practice with that. Oh, that's doubt, mental activity being known. And if there's a feeling, a visceral feeling with that doubt, like I'm totally screwed here, like a heaviness, oh, that's just that feeling being felt. So it's giving the mind over to this wisdom that deconstructs. And the reason we can get in that groove is because it really aligns with experience. It really works. Experience is never more than these 6 things being known. You will never, this is a challenge for homework, and even right now, can you ever experience something that isn't honestly best described by one of these 6 things being known? And you might say, like someone might raise their hand and say, there was this moment on top of the mountain, and the clouds moved and the sun came, and this feeling arose of just being part of the whole, the totality of the world. That's not one of those 6 sense gates being known, right? I mean, that would be, or the moment you fell in love, or the moment you had a near-death experience, or the moment, just these more peak moments that people might point to. that seems so much more than hearing being known, seeing being known, thinking being known, smell and taste being known, and whatever else I'm forgetting, touches being known, sensation being known. And it can feel almost like that's so insulting to train, like somehow anybody who would practice that way or encourage someone to practice that way, they're being so dismissive of the richness of life. But in our practice, the basic path is that the Buddha sort of suggests, if you train your heart to come into alignment with the way things are, then a lot of freedom, a lot of love, a lot of skill will arise with that alignment. If instead we live out of alignment or disconnected from the way things are, then trouble will follow us everywhere. That freedom comes with aligning with the truth of our experience, not the truth of some philosophical construct, but the actual truth of what our experience is revealing right here and now. So check out that model. And there's a really beautiful story, and I think I sent this out last week's email, Megia. This, you kind of imagine, I forget if they say, but you get a sense that he's a younger monk, maybe even a novice, and he's attending to the Buddha. And you might think, well, boy, that's kind of cool, being a senior monk, you get someone to take care of you, but it's really more mentoring. That's really what that relationship is all about. So, Megia being the attendant to the Buddha before he walks into town to get his food for the day, he asks permission, and the Buddha gives him permission. And as he's walking back from going to the village, collecting the food in his alms bowl, walking back, he sees a beautiful mango grove, and he thinks, I know how this goes, right? Because they're all the senior people. They sat down under a tree, they realize the truth, and then they become special. That's what I want. So when he gets back to where the Buddha is and has his meal, he says to the Buddha, I don't know, hopefully some of you read it, but, hey, there's a beautiful mango grove. Seems like I should go there and exert. You don't need me. You've already done your work. You're already free. So let me do my work. And the Buddha says, no, you should hang around until there's somebody else here with me. And he asked 3 times. It's sort of magic if you ask 3 times. But the Buddha, you can tell by how the Buddha, at least how it's recorded, how he responded. It's like, as you are talking about exertion, what can I say? Do what you think is now time to do. So of course he went. And the thing is, it's like we have these idealistic notions. Oh, I get it. It's about non-attachment. So I'm going to sit down in this mango grove, or and I'll just go right there. But what do we find? We find a mind that's all over the place, and probably a bodily sensations all over the place, like all the cumulative tensions in the body that we've picked up over a lifetime, right? Anybody not feel that tonight? Right? We feel that complexity of tension in the body. We feel the momentum of the thinking, worrying, planning, whatever mind doing everything that it's inclined to do because of all that momentum. And it triggers that parent that feels like the appropriate move is to get this thing under control. You know how human beings, we love it. It's like English gardens. I mean, I know it's a particular cultural expression of order, but one way or another, we like to get things ordered, organized. Because it helps modify, from an egoic point of view, it helps modify that, semi-conscious understanding of mortality. that I'm not actually in control. I'm born and I'll die, and I don't get it. And so, but at least I can, have my bathroom clean, or I can have my garden row straight or curved, or whatever your thing is, right? So it doesn't have to be sort of, Western cultural order. It could be some other version of order. But it will be some parental move so we feel safe. So instead, with this, we're specifically not trying to organize or govern. We're realizing this is being known. And as we see what's being known, we're seeing the endlessness of it, the impingement of the next thing being known, and then the next being, and has that ever ended? And there's always the next experience lined up, and then the next experience. And it's endless. And the more we're able to relax and trust our experience, the more we really get how ungovernable it is. And I like that word ungovernable, unreliable, because it really points to all three of the three characteristics that we've been studying since the summer. Right? We studied impermanence in the summer, those of you who were in that course. And then in the fall, dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature. And now here in the winter, the impersonal nature, anatta. So these really aren't three different characteristics. They're really talking about the underlying nature of phenomena, that it's natural, it's arising and passing according to the complexity of cause and effect, which can't be completely read with our limited sensitivity, but we can sense how things are lawful. They don't happen randomly. Things are unfolding in this natural and impersonal way, and can't be governed. And what that's like a very particular Dharma medicine, because notice as you do these kinds of contemplation, like if you really work with the 6 sense gate meditation this week, or maybe even for several weeks now, where you just, and then during daily life too, just keep, that's just thoughts being known, feelings being felt, seeing being seen, hearing being heard, and realizing the ungovernableness, and it really evokes a deep dispassion. And the way it's talked about in the early Buddhist tradition is, there's nothing here for me. So in terms of the world of my experience, in terms of what we mostly, with a worldly mind, see as mine, my life, my experience, my circumstance, this budding realization of, there's nothing here for me. There's nothing here worthy of grasping. There's nothing here that can be ground for self. So that dispassion, it's a very poignant movement toward freedom. But it's very poignant because it's the beginning of the death of wrong view. Right? Wrong view, self-view has to die. And it's as real as anything is real. It's also a natural process, of course, that wrong understanding, that habit of framing things in terms of me. But the more we study the underlying nature of our experience, the more what wisdom arises with wisdom is, there's nothing here for me. There's nothing here that's stable or satisfying, or that can be mine, can be owned, can be self. That's me or mine. I, me or mine. So the letting go is never something you or I have to do. So just take that off our list. Like, I got to learn how to let go. Letting go is something that happens when the sensitive heart, the sensitive mind, comes into alignment with the way it is, then letting go happens. So if you notice that you're really attached, there's no reason to not like yourself or think you're a bad Buddhist, because it's just the natural phenomena. Of course there's attachment. With wrong understanding, there's going to be attachment. And then if there's right understanding, wise understanding, then there's no attachment. So when we notice attachment, when we notice we're clinging, then it just should beg the question, oh, I wonder where, here and now, in this moment, I wonder how attachment's happening. Can it come into view? Can I sense where that is happening? Where the mind is seeing permanence when there's impermanence, is seeing satisfaction when it's not really in a lasting way satisfying. Seeing self, me, I, me, or mine, when it's just impersonal. How is that happening right now? Right? And there are these very subtle, deep habits like not being good enough can feel personal, worthy of attachment, or feeling better than. So basically conceit, any kind of conceit, even thinking I'm the same as, these are subtle things that generally go unseen. And there are more obvious kinds of attachments, really wanting something to happen. You might feel like you have some skin in the game about what happens with the Iowa caucuses, And you're deeply grateful to have this class, so you're not watching the news way before anybody knows anything. That's just one of the most poignant kinds of suffering. Watching people talk about things when they don't have anything to talk about. So we'll go to 10 tonight. And you know what's going to happen? Nothing will be resolved. We still won't know what's going to happen. But that's an interesting attachment, isn't it? Because I think it's interesting, because I think it's one of those things where we might actually have an attachment, like could be the attachment, I really need to know, I really want to know who's going to win. It really matters who wins. But we can feel like we can deconstruct that, and we might even really pop the whole projection of self, of I, me, or mine around this, like whatever your political leanings might be. And so we'll go from noticing the congealing and the heaviness because of attachment and having an opinion and having desire, attachment to desire, and then it pops, and then it's still the Iowa caucuses. It still might be curious to see what happens, but there's no psychic weight, no skin in the game. There's nothing here for me. No, nothing here for me is not the same as I don't care, or that one scenario might lead to more suffering and another scenario to less suffering for people, right? It just means that even the arising of tremendous suffering and the minimizing, the alleviation of suffering, even that is just that being known. So experience, we know this deeply, right? Experience can absolutely be misunderstood and be experienced as I, me, or mine. Anybody not deeply suffer in their life? I mean, anybody not have experience that felt really beautiful or heavy, difficult? Yeah, all of us, I'm sure. The question, so we don't forget how impactful suffering is just because the wisdom deepens and we learn how to be in the world of happiness and suffering in a really light way, right? So you might have developed a lot of wisdom And you in your life you cycle through financial ruin and wonderful success and getting cancer and then getting cured and losing a loved one and this and then that. But because of the maturing of your practice, your heart isn't identifying with the times of suffering and the times of happiness. It's not I, me, or mining around the pleasant times and the difficult times. But we don't forget the tendency of what our mind used to do and what most everybody else's mind is doing. So we don't lose compassion for the world because we understand that I can be in the world of happiness and unhappiness without being confused by it. Oh yeah, things are really good, there's a lot of happiness, and there's nothing here for me. Things are really bad, I'm really confused in my life, difficult habit energies are being triggered, my knee hurts, I have indigestion, and there's nothing here for me. There's no part of the mind bothering to own that difficulty. Now I know this is hard to kind of get, but we just want to, and this is where this little discourse comes in, because the Buddha, when Maggia goes back to the Buddha and says, how amazing, I sat down and I was attacked by my own mind, Instead of goodwill, there was ill will. Instead of generosity and contentment, there was greed and wanting. Instead of compassion, there was inner aggression or whatever. How amazing. He was kind of stunned. He thought, beautiful mango grove, I know what I'm doing. But it isn't enough to have the secret teaching, attachment bad, non-attachment good, right? We all have heard the inner teaching, right? We all know clinging, not good. Non-clinging, good. But it doesn't help us. So this is, if you didn't read this is what the Buddha responds to Maggia. Maggia, in one whose awareness release, I like that. This is Ajahn Thanissaro's translation of, I think, Vimutti, that liberation. In one whose liberation, whose freedom is still immature, awareness release is still immature, 5 qualities bring it to maturity. So now, we might want to listen, because it's like he's going to lay something out. There is a case where a monk, a practitioner like us, has admirable people as friends, companions, and comrades. And one whose awareness release is still mature, this is the first quality that brings it to maturity. Now generally when the Buddha is talking about admirable people, he's talking about people with deep insight. And they're not so easy to come by, but we have books for sure and teachings by wise people. More than we could ever use. In a way it's a little confusing, but the important thing is, with things like Dharma Seed and places like Common Ground, we have wise community and wise friends, and keeping close to the teachings really helps. And remember, when people were lamenting that the Buddha was going to die, he said, it's the teachings that are relevant, not this body, not this person. Right? It's the teaching, and it's people who have developed insight from following, integrating the teachings. That's being close to that is the first quality that brings our practice to maturity. And then the second is developing virtuous behavior, so cleaning up our act. Really getting interested in the value of non-harming in our lives, and really training in it. And seeing danger when my mind rationalizes deviation from my value of non-harming. I'm busy I don't have time to do this with the kind of care I'd like to do it with. I mean, I think it really gets stronger as we don't get away with as much, I think. This is a little bit magical thinking, but seems like there's some truth to it. We really commit to our practice, walk this path as best we can, and it's like, oh, I don't want to put as much thought in this email, I'm just going to get it off. But we have this sort of warning signs, mindfulness bells going off in our heart, like, this is a situation where the person could easily misinterpret, so maybe you should be really thoughtful about what you write or what you say. Because you care, because you really value not causing harm. These little things like that. And then the third factor that helps our practice mature. Furthermore, one gets to hear at will, easily, without difficulty, talk that is truly sobering and conducive to the opening of awareness. Talk on modesty, contentment, seclusion, non-entanglement, arousing persistence, virtue, concentration, wisdom, release, knowledge, and vision of the way it is, things as they are. And one whose awareness release is still mature, this is the third quality that brings it to maturity. Furthermore, one keeps one's persistence aroused for the abandoning of unskillful mental qualities, right, and the taking up of skillful. So we don't pretend it doesn't matter what the mind is doing. We take deep responsibility, like we would for a newborn baby, for the quality of our own heart and mind. How's the mind doing? What is it dwelling on? Is it dwelling with irritation, or is it dwelling with kindness? Is it entangled with stinginess, or is it grounded in contentment and generosity? Is it valuing and appreciating non-harming, or is it like, hey, this is life, You just got to do what you got to do. Take advantage. And then now the fifth. Furthermore, one is discerning, endowed with the discernment of arising and passing away, noble, penetrating, leading to the right ending of stress. Right? So this is kind of code, this arising and passing away. It's code for waking up to the three characteristics, right? So it's talking specifically about anicca, impermanence, arising and passing away, seeing that this moment is a movement of six things, or just simply a movement of bodily activity, a movement of mental activity being known. It's a flow. One moment of something being known, another moment of something being known, another moment of something being known. And those somethings being known, body, the five physical senses, and the mind. The mind is perception, feeling tone, intention, mental formations, and the knowing itself, consciousness itself. So, seeing that flow, seeing that it's coming and going, seeing that it's unsatisfactory, seeing its personal nature, that's what leads to the letting go, where the heart drops its habit of imagining that this is more. Every time the mind makes up meaning that it's more, this moment is more than what it is, like it's about me, or it belongs to me, or I'm back here somewhere, then all of a sudden the mind has something to protect. In the same way, which is so common for us, of course, and we'll talk more about this in either next week or the following week, about the body as not self, right? So when, and we do, personalize the body, then I'm afraid of aging because it's going to happen to me because I've personalize the body. And I'm also afraid of the flu right? Win, most of you know Win, the other co-founder of Common Ground and my partner. She flew to New Jersey late Saturday night, or mid-evening Saturday night. Said there was almost nobody. She walked right to the security line. Nobody was there. There were 4 places she could go, through the machine. And she said there were a lot of people wearing masks. She was a little freaked out. I mean, not in a serious way, but she's like, oh, that's a little weird. Right? So, it's this fear we have for the body because of the identification. But if we cultivate the perception that the body's nature, not self, right? It does what nature does, takes birth, grows old, dies, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, sometimes this way, sometimes that way. Sometimes there's pain, sometimes there's pleasure arising in the body. I mean, it sounds crazy, like, oh, right, I'm not going to take the bodily experience personally. Because you absolutely can. No one will stop you from really personalizing your experience of body. Just like you can really personalize what you think is happening in the United States, or what you think is happening with the global climate, or what you think your partner's doing, and whether you think that's the right thing for that partner to be doing. Right? You can personalize anything and have all kinds of opinions. And the interesting question is, are you willing to check to see how that's working for you? Like, what is that set in motion for a human life? And is that what we want to set in motion? That deep, pervasive habit of personalizing things. So tonight in the small groups, personalizing thought, just talking about how seductive mental activity is. And just normalizing it for the three of you in the small group. Don't, it's not like we're expecting our partners in the small group to somehow say, yeah, it's been 10 years since I've been identified with a thought. They're like clouds in the vast, infinite space of awareness, coming and going, No, I mean, it's very potent for human beings to talk about identification with thought. Only wisdom can talk. It's only from the point of view of wisdom can we talk about how seductive mental activity is. It's a way of poking holes in the attachment, in the habit of identifying with mental activity, to talk about how attached I am when this arises. When this person at work says this kind of thing to me, then this huge solid edifice arises in my mind, and there's absolutely no space of non-attachment. It's absolutely true. That person is and I am and that's like as solid and real as anything, right? So to kind of share now with a sense of wise humor, like, that's amazing, when now with a little bit more space, I see that's a construction that the mind, due to habit, takes personally, and it comes with real suffering. So that's kind of what I'm imagining for the discussion, but of course anything that seems relevant in terms of what you're learning in the practice will be useful. I went through the etiquette for these small groups